All right, we are back, and today we're talking about one of the more fascinating things in the post-World War II era, and that is Levittown and the birth of the suburbs. Again, just like the Eisenhower interstate system, this is something that we see the effects of today. You can look around your communities and you can see how history has affected us and how it's affecting how we still live. Now, after World War II, families are really growing. We have the baby boom, we have a strong economy, and people are looking to spread out. Whereas in the Great Depression and war, families were contracting. They were moving in multiple generations in order to share expenses and so forth during that difficult time. But now that times are good, people are wanting elbow room. They're wanting to spread out, a place of their own, a place to raise their family that's safe and quiet, and a little piece of property for themselves. That's the American dream. That's what it's always been about. So what we're going to see is that Joseph Levitt creates something brand new. It's an affordable neighborhoods outside the city. The suburbs are born with his creation. He's going to apply modern manufacturing techniques, cutting out all the waste, cutting out all the inefficiencies, saving time by replicating the process over and over and over again in order to lower the cost. If he can lower the cost, he can make it more appealing for families, more people buy in. He has an economy of scale. And so we can see neighborhoods like this one crop up all over the eastern part of the United States where he's first developing this process. Thousands and thousands and thousands of homes in this Levittown-styled neighborhood. Now, what happens is families that buy into these homes are going to lower their cost because they don't have unlimited choices. They have 3, 4, maybe 5 choices of home plans. That's going to save on architectural drawing cost, right? Because the architect isn't going to have to draw 400 different homes, one for each plot in this neighborhood. He's drawing 4, and it's being replicated 100 times a piece. So you're saving money there. All the lumber for that house, once they've got it down to a science, they can pre-cut the lumber. It's going to be delivered on site, and now they can throw the houses up pretty quick. There's a lot less waste. It's a lot more efficient. The crews that are building these houses have gotten really good at it because they've built that house 40 times already. So they kind of know the process. All of that lowers the cost to an average of about, in 1953, about $8,000. Now, adjusted for inflation, because I know a lot of people will be wondering, yeah, that's the 1950s, everything was cheaper. Adjusted for inflation, that's about $75,000. The same type of home, square footage, and everything today would typically cost in the neighborhood, at least in the Midwest. We're not talking about San Francisco or New York or Chicago, but a typical Midwest home of that nature in the Midwest would cost about $130 to $150. So we're looking at half of what today's homes cost. These were the good old days. We loved this. And so people flocked to these suburbs because they got to live in a brand new home. Nothing was used, nothing was in disrepair, nothing needed replaced. It was all brand new, and they got to put their stamp on it. So these neighborhoods become known as Levittowns. There was Levittown, Pennsylvania, Levittown, New Jersey, Levittown, Delaware, a Levittown in New York on Long Island. Those neighborhoods are still there. People are still living in those homes. Just because they were inexpensive didn't mean they were poorly constructed. They were still well-made homes. We had just used those modern manufacturing techniques to cut out all the waste, all the inefficiencies. And this really allowed people to realize the dream of home ownership. This is the American dream, right? In the colonial times and up until now, it may have been about having a farm, right? Having something of your own to grow crops. Now it's about having a house with a white picket fence. And home ownership is huge because it speaks to a more stable society. It speaks to a more stable economy, a more stable workforce. This is really good. People who own homes, they're more bought into the direction of the country. I mean, this just speaks volumes of success and prosperity, and we love it. It gives people what they so desperately want. It's not for everybody. The houses are close together, the yards are small, but it's a lot better than oftentimes those inner city apartments and those urban centers. It's just something a little bit different. Now, the suburbs are going to be born, and that's going to be aided by the proliferation of the automobile. It's going to be aided by the building of the interstate. It's going to be supported by the GI Bill that offers 16.5 million men returning from war the opportunity for low-cost home loans. So this is affordable. It's within reach for a lot of American people. Now, this new suburban sprawl, and that's one of the problems, right, is it increases the footprint. Today, we would look at the effect on the environment, the effect on natural habitat. The spread of the cities is a little bit of a problem. But back then, people weren't really considering that. They weren't thinking about that. It was simply an opportunity for them to have that American dream fulfilled. But it is going to mean that businesses have to shift and adapt to a new style of living. No longer do you need to be located right in the center of the city. Grocery stores, gas stations, shopping centers are all going to have to now cater to that suburban lifestyle, those population centers that have shifted outside the city. And so we're all familiar with shopping centers like this where stores have moved in and that sort of stuff. Now, one of the downsides, we talked about urban sprawl, one of the other downsides, and this is a really good thing, right? Home ownership is a fantastic thing, but as I've said before, there's always a downside when we analyze this. As people flee the cities in favor of the suburbs, we're going to hear a new word come into existence, and that's the idea of urban decay. The people who are left behind, the ones that are trapped in the city because they can't afford to move to the suburbs, mean that you're going to have general decay and disrepair. Repairs on buildings that once were full and thriving are now having to make ends meet with far fewer residents. The rents go down, the buildings don't get repaired as much or as quickly, and there's just this general sense of decay. Typically, the people who suffer from this most are minority groups, such as African Americans, who had congregated heavily in some of those urban neighborhoods and are either unable financially to move out or are being kept from moving out by discriminatory lending policies from banks or discriminatory neighborhoods that won't allow African Americans to buy in those places. So there is some downside to this. In the end, at the end of the day, a lot of neighborhoods and a lot of people live in these development neighborhoods where they just go and buy a huge field, split it up into lots, homes close together. You walk through the model, you pick out your upgrades and so forth. But this is the style of living that a lot of Americans are familiar with today, and it all begins with this Levittown idea that gets replicated by many, many builders. So hopefully, guys, again, hopefully you can see the connection to history, how it changed and shaped the way that we live, and where we live, and all those sorts of things. I appreciate you watching. Subscribe, like the video, leave me any comments. I'm sure there's some stuff that I forgot. But until next time, guys, thank you.